morning and welcome to another edition of Kirklees Local Television's Weekly Wind-Up. I'm Donna Marie, your host, and today our panel consists of Professor Paul Ward from the University of Huddersfield. We also have Josh Elderfield, and he's also from the Student Union at Huddersfield University. And we have Kyle Warwick, our resident guest. Okay. Before we begin, I just would like to remind you that anything you see today, you can look on our website at info@kirkleeslocaltv.com or via Twitter at the Weekly Wind-Up. Okay. So today we'll be looking at three topics. Firstly, the Scottish Referendum. And we're doing a part two. It was so insightful last week, and we thought we'll revisit it. We're also looking at the Indian spaceship launch into orbiting around Mars. And finally, we're looking at Freshers Week at the University of Huddersfield, but also university-wide. Okay? So we will begin with the Scottish Referendum. So can I just ask then, first of all, Professor Paul, in terms of the referendum, now, Whitehall had said that they would be making and giving the Scottish voters and the Scottish Parliament more power. Do you think that is possible? And what does that mean for the other countries within the Union? Yeah.
The Scottish referendum seems an awful long time ago, really, in politics, because before the referendum they made lots of promises. Saying Scotland would get more power if it voted no, but almost instantly that the vote went no, the parties divided again. David Cameron tried to wrap it up with reform of English powers. English Conservative MP said, why should Scottish MPs be able to vote on English matters? The Labour Party said that they wouldn't link it to reform of England. So I think it's one of those things where the impact in Scotland was absolutely enormous, but already London's insensitivity is playing a part in the outcomes of the election. I'm sure change will happen, but I think British politicians, London politicians need pushing more. It's also the case that in Scotland the 45 plus campaign is rolling forward, saying this cannot be the end of the independence discussion, that this has to be the start of thinking about powers for Scotland.
Okay, fine. And do you want to make a contribution then?
Yeah, absolutely. I just feel like this is kind of systematic of what goes on in politics in Britain, really. There's what politicians say during elections and during referendums, and then what they actually do when they get power, and that can be seen in the way that David Cameron's been talking at the Conservative Party conference this week, very much sitting on the fence on a lot of issues and trying to present himself as a good face for the right of the Conservatives, but as well the sort of more conservative Labour end as well, trying to attract as many people to the Conservative Party as possible for the coming election. And I think a lot of people in British politics did exactly the same with the Scottish referendum, and the Scottish people shouldn't really be surprised that British politicians have reneged on the promises that they made.
What's interesting is that politicians often talk about civic disengagement. People aren't interested in politics. Mm-hmm. In Scotland, more than 85% of people voted, so they engaged.
Absolutely.
And the result of that engagement might be, it's likely to be broken promises. So, so they want it both ways, really.
Yes.
So.
And what about you, Josh? What would you like to contribute anything to this discussion at all?
Yeah, I mean, we all know that some MPs perhaps don't stick to the promises, and we saw that in the last general election. But I think it's in their interest to stick to their promises, or at least, stick to what they pledged during this referendum. With the next general election coming up next year, if MPs want to stand a good chance next year, they're going to need to stick to what they've promised to the people of Scotland if they want to stand a chance of being elected again next May.
Can I just ask then, who would you say are the winners and losers in this election? Anybody? Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, I'd say Gordon Brown.
Winner or loser?
Absolutely a winner. I think the out of everybody, he was somebody that when he came to power in England, he was kind of handed power, and people was handed a situation that was extremely difficult for him. He was left a lot of problems that were left over by Tony Blair that weren't being dealt with, that he then had to deal with. He was plugging holes in the Labour Party. There was a lot of people in the Labour Party that were disenfranchised by New Labour, and the fact that Tony Blair was essentially a leftist conservative, really. And Gordon Brown came out and gave a fantastic speech. He was extremely passionate in a way that nobody in Britain had really seen him be that passionate or that on point about topics whilst he was Prime Minister, because he was constantly plugging holes in his party and attempting to stop a groundswell towards Conservatives, and I think he came out of it shining, really.
Good. Josh?
Yeah, Gordon Brown's speech really did spread across the social media from what I saw, and it really would have helped the likes of Alistair Darling and Ed Miliband during the campaign. It was such a good win for Labour, considering that with their 40 seats in Scotland, so it puts them in great stead for next year. So those from the Labour Party and the No campaign would have really benefited from this.
Good.
I would say that I disagree that it was good for Ed Miliband. I think it was kind of a situation where somebody that people thought Gordon Brown was quite weak, and he came out and proved himself to be quite a lot stronger than Ed Miliband in a lot of respects, and to have a lot more sort of stalwart Labour ideals. And I think there's a lot of the Labour core that are maybe looking at Gordon Brown and thinking, well, maybe we should have given him a bit more time, really.
Okay. Well, there you have it. The panel's view is that London's influence is still going to be predominant. It seems as if it is a resumption of the status quo. Nothing will change, even though they say. But also, it's hopeful that there might be an interest to stick to the promises. And finally, Gordon Brown seems to have come out on top and smelling of roses. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the Indian spaceship orbiting into Mars. Now, this is a story that sort of crept upon us, in that whilst the leaders, the Western world, the free world, we'll say, are engaging in battle with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Syria, and global terrorism overall, India has quietly created history by becoming the 4th country in history to be or to have a successful mission around Mars. So first of all, I'd just like to put this out to the panel. Is this heralding India's arrival as a global superpower? Because there's a strong rivalry between themselves and China. What do we think, panel? Yeah? Go on, Carl, yeah?
For me, anyway, like, India is the main emerging economy and political force now. It's a massive population. They do have a lot of problems with poverty, but they also have extremely growing industries and a lot of things that point to them becoming a new political force. When you contrast to that, to the sort of stability that India has compared to the problems in Hong Kong now that China are having, I think it is indicative of them emerging to a greater extent, and I think Western governments maybe need to stand up and take note of the fact that India are a coming force.
Well, can I just ask then, because you've touched on a really significant point. Now, India spent 43 million on this project, yeah? Would you say it's a waste of money? We have a saying, is it the poor showing great? Because certainly the population in India, the majority, are actually still in the poverty line. How do we classify, we talk about this?
I want to say that it's a waste of money, but because of the poverty in India. But on the other hand, I think it's actually money well spent, because we've talked about growing economies, and I think we need just to step back a little bit and not think these are economies that are growing in relation to us. But actually, this is the world fundamentally changing, that the world is not dominated from the West, that the balance of power will shift, and that we can't be complacent or can't presume that we are the centre of the world. So I think 43 million, and that sounds quite low to get to Mars, I have to say, 43 million actually shows the world that India, the biggest democracy in the world, is a force to be reckoned with. Now, I don't mean that in any conflictual terms. I don't think we're looking at any conflict between North and South or East and West here. But if we can puncture Western complacency that we know how to do things and nowhere else quite does, then I think it's certainly money well spent.
And what would you say then, Josh, in terms of why is this event not seen for what it is and celebrated instead of a lot of the bashing and thinking, oh, it's poor showing great?
I think perhaps because people, it just came out of nowhere and people didn't know that India perhaps were involved in this project. And yes, £43 million seems quite efficient in my opinion compared to the likes of NASA, where NASA spent 10 times as much to essentially achieve the same goal. And it has to be said actually that China failed to launch their craft into the orbit of Mars, whereas India did. And so I don't think it's a waste of money, and I think perhaps it's just caught other nations off guard, I suppose.
What's interesting is that India has been involved in space exploration since 1975, and yet we've only just noticed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think that that's really important. That issue. I would say personally, I think that space exploration is a waste. That you can't imagine that they're going into space in order to protect it, in order to make anything good come of it. Like much else, they're looking for ways of exploiting whatever resources they find. And India, the United States, China, Russia, the United Kingdom are very bad at protecting the resources of the Earth. So I'm not sure they can really be trusted with the resources of space.
No, well, India has been described as one of the BRIC countries. So it's Brazil, Russia, India, and China, yeah? And even though they are developing and they're an emerging world market, there still is a lot of poverty. And as a result, Western countries, the G8 countries, do plow in a lot of resources to help with social infrastructure. Now, if India is able to spend 43 million on space exploration, is that saying that the funds that should have been targeting towards bettering the lives of the citizens that are disenfranchised is being diverted into something else? Panel, what do we think?
I'm entirely unconvinced by the argument that the West puts money in to the BRIC countries and other countries for their own for the benefit of those countries. What they're trying to do is they're trying to build markets, because alongside that infrastructural support comes free trade agreements that destroy local industries, that pave the way for multinationals. So, in some ways, again, the Indian government deciding that what they want to do is to assert their authority is a blow against that desire for Western capitalism to dominate the South and the East.
And yeah, I would say as well, it's one of those situations where it's quite easy for people in Western countries that send in aid to other countries to look down on anything of development in that country. But I think Britain, and considering we sent the East India Trading Company to India and ravaged it for hundreds of years, I think we're the last people that are able to complain about India developing in any way.
But it's a funny balance, really, because I think that maybe about 2-3 years ago, I stand corrected, that, is it Iraq or Iran, tried to launch something sort of that they were doing some space exploration. And because of the nature of that country in terms of terrorism prospects, it was quickly shut down. Nobody even mentioned it. I couldn't even find anything on it much. So what's the difference between a country like Iran and a country like India, who also has issues with terrorism and so on? What's the difference between that country trying to get into space as against, say, Iran or Iraq or any other country for that matter?
I would say that certainly in the last, since the late 80s, early 90s, we've been looking to get into Iran and Iraq to tap into their oil supplies, and that's kind of been the goal. So we've made enemies of the people of Iran and Iraq in the newspapers and in the media, and showing those countries to be doing anything progressive would be against the sort of tabloid ideal of what we try to depict Iranian and Iraqi people as.
Okay.
Indian people are kind of seen as almost an extension of the British Empire and somebody that we can relate to on a political level. That's not the case with Iran and Iraq, I'd say.
I usually like to agree with Kyle because he says good things. But I mean, the fundamental difference is that India is a democracy, really. So, and I agree that it's easy for people in Britain to say, well, we used to rule them. Democracy is a result of what we did, and that does create a connection. But you know, in India, democracy works on the whole. You know, clearly there's immense problems in a country of such a size, but you know, democracies can be more trusted than autocracies or dictatorships. Now, I actually agree with lots of what Kyle said, that people aren't allowed to do stuff if we disagree with them, even if it's good stuff.
The view of the panel then is that India is an emerging force, and regardless of what we do or say, they will be coming out. It's also money well spent, and the world is changing, and so Western countries will have to accept that other countries will be catching up. So there we have it. The final topic we'll be looking at then is, of course, the Freshers' Week. Now, as a student, and I believe all of us are aware that it's like Mardi Gras of university. All students, young and old, new ones, old ones, look forward to Freshers' Week. But I'd really like to understand, I'm going to put this out to the panel, particularly to my student union representative. Now, students look forward to the goodies and the freebies that are being given. We could also say that the university staff, lecturers and staff generally, just take this as a calm before the storm. But on a serious note, I'd like to understand, is Freshers' Week really necessary? I'll ask you first.
It's incredibly necessary. This is the first time for many students that they're living away from home, and I think it's really, really vital that before they start their studies, students have that platform to meet people, to get involved in events, activities, volunteering, all the kinds of stuff that they won't perhaps do in their classroom, and to see what's there for them at their university experience. Some people have come from afar, and it's not just for first year undergraduate students as well. This could be a first time for mature students who've come out of work to study again, and they need that platform, as I say, to find out what's for them. What sports clubs can they join? What societies can they join? Can they set up one if there isn't already one? How can they get involved in volunteering? How can they get involved in enterprise business that they perhaps thought about but didn't particularly know who to speak to about it? And all these kinds of things. The Freshers' Week is really vital, and it's not just drinking events that they do as well. It's just genuine social events run by the Students' Union, not the university. And last week for us at the Huddersfield Students' Union, it was by far the most successful Freshers' Week we at the Students' Union have ever run.
In your opinion then, Professor Ward, what is the impact of this on the university community now, the university?
What I think that Freshers' Week does is it reminds staff, it reminds the university that coming to university is a life-changing event that deserves celebration. I mean, I'd go back to Josh's point about these are people often living away from home for the first time, but they're also half of our students come from the local area, and they need to know that they're changing their lives. That they may still be, by necessity be living with their parents, but they're changing their lives by being part of something new. So I think it's a great reminder for staff, because I've been at Huddersfield for 14 years, so you know they just keep coming, these students, and it's a reminder that they are excited, they're anxious, they're looking for friends. It amazes me that when you put a room full of new students together, they all have high expectations of each other, and I think that's really fantastic.
But can I ask though, what is the social return on investment? Can I come to you on that one? Would you be able to contribute something on that?
Social return on investment. I think it's if you're not comfortable going to university, I certainly speak for myself. When I went to university in South Wales. There was one other person from this area who went to the same university with me, and that sort of Freshers' Week was instrumental in getting me involved in different societies and also getting me kind of integrated into the town that I was living with. I didn't really know Newport. I'd never been before, and it kind of got me. Joined a football team, and then with the football team you go around the town and you get to find little areas that you wouldn't have found before in the town and if you were on your own. So it really made me feel comfortable, not just spending my time in accommodation, but actually going out into the university, using the university's facilities, and going out into the town and being part of the town as well. And I think that's extremely important, that the university isn't just something that's external to the town. It's got to be integrated with the town as well. Okay. And businesses have to be able to take advantage of that, and that can only really happen if the students know what businesses are there.
Okay, well, there you have it again. The view is that this Freshers' Week helps in the transition for students to meet people and to settle in. It's independent of the university, so there's no influence. You couldn't say there's a hidden agenda by the universities. There we go. So I'd like to thank the panel for participating today. Really appreciate that. And I'd just like to invite you, anybody watching, that you can go to our website. It's info@kirkleestv.com, or you can access us via Twitter @The Weekly Windup. Today it's been a good discussion, and I invite you to join us next time when we will also have another insightful presentation. I'm Donna Marie. Thank you for watching.